Digital design thinking focus on monetizing creative content online. And the thesis or premise of this particular session is traditional models of theater going and performance are being forced to evolve with the contemporary reality of digital technology, which is now at the forefront of everything we do. How are the arts responding and adjusting to this new reality? Part resources, part strategy, part digital design thinking and integration into the performing arts is required. Highlighting once again the inequitable distribution of resources across the disciplines, practice, and the socio-cultural realities. And for someone who's also the program manager of SUPAMO, I have to be mindful about those resources as it implicates IBPOC, Indigenous Black people of color artists and arts organizations differently in a larger set of historical funding, but in a larger way of how we are able to put our content into this digital space or potentially monetize it. I'm joined by 4 amazing persons. We have Aaliyah Erica Clark. We have Laurence Lemieux. We have Nina Jaya Rajan. And we have April Britsky. And I'm going to introduce each person into the conversation and read a short snippet of their bios. And they will basically start with their own ideas around what this all means for them in their organizations, in the work that they do. And then we're going to have an open, broad conversation drawing from each other's information to support the discussion as we move forward. So to start, April Britsky is the executive director of CARFACT, Canada's National Association of Visual Arts. She's worked and volunteered as an arts administrator since 1998 and joined the staff at CARFACT National in 2005. She's the co-founder of the Artists Legal Services Ottawa and Visual Arts Alliance, and she's served on several boards of cultural policy, art, and arts-run organizations. Welcome, April.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to see everybody. Thank you for inviting me. It's a really fascinating topic. I mean, everybody is obsessed with all things digital. For the last couple of years, it was necessary just to keep things going. For some, it makes things more efficient. Others, we hope it brings new audiences. And frankly, for many of us, it's where the big culture money is right now. So CARFAC works to improve artists' economic and legal rights. So I'm going to start by talking about pay equity. And I think, many of you are involved in performing arts. So probably the big elephant in the room that people are talking a lot about right now is Bill C-11, which essentially brings regulation to online platforms that broadcast content and the potential that brings for profit sharing. And admittedly, I don't have a lot to say about that because visual artists don't really have much involvement with audio-visual broadcasting. But we do stand behind artists on this because a lot of money is made on the sharing of Canadian creative content. And we want creators to be fairly paid. You know what? Maybe it's because I'm on the West Coast and it's getting close to lunch and I'm a little hungry, but I like pie. I like cherry pie. I love Saskatoon pie. My mom's apple pie. Oh, it's amazing. I love all of it. Well, okay, maybe not mincemeat, but basically, if pie is available, I want some. And creators are really the key ingredient of any good piece of pie. I don't know if my metaphor just fell apart there, but really, we're hoping that Bill C-11 is going to help them get some more of that. And I'm hoping that it's going to help pave the way for visual artists to get their fair share, or like literally any share would be nice at this point. So we all know art is all over the internet, and artists rarely get paid for that. In fact, they're far more likely to get ripped off for sharing it online. Many artists use social media platforms for free, but someone else is definitely making money on it. And it's really hard to fight big tech. So bravo to the Canadian government for trying to do it on behalf of us with big platforms like YouTube and Netflix, and hopefully we get some good news next month. But I'm going to use a visual example to, because, visual arts, that's what we do, just to sort of illustrate just how much big tech dominates the digital space. And a couple of years ago, an artist came to us with a complaint about Google Arts and Culture. This artist's work was in a public collection. The institution wanted permission to let Google take an extremely high-res image of their art, something that we all know is a bad idea. It's the best way to get your work stolen online. But they wanted to do this, and they wanted to post it on Google Arts and Culture. And they offered a few $100s to make it available on there for 5 years. Which might be fair if they were just hosting it on their website, but we're talking about Google, like they've got billions of dollars, and they don't pay artists anything to participate on Google Arts and Culture. They contact museums all over the world saying, oh, look at all the exposure you'll get from this and sharing your collections, but they don't pay a cent. So the artists that do get paid by those institutions themselves if they do offer it, not Google. So you might think maybe this is a good deal, but I'm going to show you an example here. If you do a Google search of Frida Kahlo's self-portrait with a monkey, this is what you get. And the usual results pop up on the left, but if you look at what's on the right, there's an image. And it's got the information about the painting, the artist, the museum, and when you click on it, it takes you to the museum. It doesn't take you to the museum, it takes you to Google Arts and Culture. So the way the page is laid out, it directs you away from various sources of useful information, credible information about the artist and their artwork, and it takes you instead to Google Arts and Culture. And there's definitely some cool stuff there. Like you can zoom right in. Remember that high-res image? We can all look at cracks in a painting in New York right now if we want to. You can also view it in augmented reality. And so using Google's art projector, you can have you can put it on your phone and view it, see what this work would look like right in front of you if you wanted to. Now, believe me, famous art doesn't look that great in my home. I wish it did, but it definitely looks better on the walls of a museum, for sure. And you can view it there too in Street View, also a Google product. So there's the piece. There it is in the museum. Some museums have blocked out works that they didn't get permission for. This one obviously didn't. I don't know what that means, but basically, yeah. So look, all of this is cool, but when you search Frida Kahlo's work, it takes you here, not to reputable sources about the artist or the museum. And who does that ultimately really serve? I'm not typically concerned with protecting the rights and profitability of artists' estates, but Kahlo's family spends an incredible amount of time and money for just defending the integrity of her personality rights, which happens because everybody basically wants a piece of her. Now, Google Arts and Culture hasn't really caught on worldwide, and definitely not in Canada, but it could. And so some museums are sharing works by living artists, like Kent Monkman is on there, for example. And they don't have as many features for the most part. They save those for the dead artists that make more money and can't fight back, basically, is what I think is happening. So this is what happens when you don't regulate new forms of technology fast enough. They monopolize the sharing of images online, and that gets harder to fight and compete with over time. So if the act changes, it really won't help us get a piece of Google Arts and Culture, but it could open the door for us to have conversations with them about profit sharing, and it gives us a bit more bargaining power. So in the meantime, artists are creating our own platforms because the Canada Council is investing in that. And so Carfac, along with our partners at RAV and Prescient Innovations, have created Imprimo, which was just publicly launched about 6 weeks ago. And it's been built on the guidance of artists and copyright experts with added protections like identity verification, and adding tamper-proof digital signature codes that's unique to you, and a whole lot more. Because if the laws are going to be behind in protecting us, we need to take control in our own hands. And so we're really behind in visual arts. We've learned a lot from peer-to-peer sharing platforms over the last 20 years, and we figured out some things that worked well and some things that didn't. And we really hope that this is attractive to artists because it does have some pretty cool features. Oh gosh, okay. Sorry, I'm trying to share something else. So if you want to see kind of what it looks like. This is the platform. This is an awesome work by Nadia Mir, the Indian Act. You can see the work, you can see installation shots, you can see details, but you can't right click. So I'm sure there's probably some way that somebody could steal it, but it's we are building security features with this kind of practice in mind. You can see all the metadata on the side, some search terms, a bit of description about the work. You can see the artwork timeline. You can see where her work is available for exhibition or for sale. And then if you say, you know what, I don't think Nadia Mir created that work, that's actually mine. It isn't. She definitely made this piece. You can dispute the claim at the bottom, which is pretty cool. And now and here's the part that I also really like. So this is another artist, Lis Letourneau, who has a profile. There's a picture, description of her work. Again, all her social media handles. And then you can also see her CV. This is a bilingual website as well. So Lis put this up, hers up in French, but yeah, her CV. So it's no longer a black and white document. You can see which works were in a show by clicking on these little boxes. You can see installation shots. The artist could include studio shots if they want to. They can include videos of her or the curator talking about their work, and so much more. So that, you know, this really helps artists and art lovers track the provenance and the journey of a work, and to tell its story in a way that I don't think we've really seen much of before. So yeah, it's visual. Who knew? Hey. I'm probably running out of time, but I do want to say that like all platforms, and ours included, have a responsibility to make sure that they're equitable and accessible. Some are way better than that at others, but you know, we are trying. So, you know, you can put transcription services like we see here today on Zoom, which is amazing, or on YouTube videos. Artists in northern communities and remote communities certainly struggle with access to some platforms because broadband is terrible. It's not fast enough or reliable enough. But I actually heard that artists in Nunavut really like Facebook because they invested a lot of money into making sure that anywhere, anybody can access the platform. So, I mean, for better or worse, I guess, in terms of like the power that they have in that. But basically, Inuit artists post on Facebook and use Messenger an awful lot. And they're selling their work. They've been selling their work there much longer through sites like this. Like this was way before Facebook Marketplace happened. People have been using it as like an auction space where people can sell their work directly with people who are interested in seeing it, which is pretty fantastic. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunity if those who have the pie invest in artists and communities. So yeah, I'm just gonna wrap it up. I mean, I have a lot more to say about the problems of discoverability, the unpaid and inadequately paid labor that's happening when you present art online. NFTs, a colleague will be speaking about that later on. So maybe we'll have some back and forth on that, but I'm gonna stop there. And yeah, looking forward to hearing more.
Thank you. You could go on. This is our forum to actually go on. But I have a question for you at this point, April. I'm a visual artist, not a visual artist. I'm you know, imagining I'm a visual artist. Mm-hmm. What are some of the, what steps can I begin to consider as I make my art digitized or move online?
Well, I think you have to think really hard and carefully about what you put up and how you put it up. So, you know, a lot of people put works on Instagram or on Facebook. There's no like copyright claim. Like their work can get ripped off, whether that claim is there for sure, but it certainly helps. It helps people understand that this isn't just stuff for the taking. And I think, you know, with platforms like Imprimo, because they does track the provenance. If you do have somebody claiming that they've ripped off your work, you can use that as a defense in court or various different circumstances. We're looking at like different people who've ripped off artists' work and are selling it on like t-shirts and mugs and all kinds of crap in the States. And, you know, there's potential there for class action claims and things like that. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's more like just, you know, you're going to share it. Be careful where you share it. And with more platforms being built with your kind of interests in mind, hopefully people will kind of gravitate more to those spaces, I hope. Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember what your question was, but
That's definitely the
what should
question.
people think about? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I think presenters need to think about. So like during the pandemic, you know, artists were asked, like, you may have had an exhibition on the walls and all of a sudden they're closed and they had to try to scramble to try to present it online. And what's happening is that like visual artists at least are paid for like they're used to being paid for the exhibition of their work or potentially the installation and artist talks around it, but now they have to do that twice because you also have to record it. Sometimes you have to do that yourself, like presenting it online and in person, like the compensation needs to be considered that while you're doing both, it's much more content, it's a lot more work, and those things have to be paid for. And so ask for it.
Thank you. And you've also brought up a beautiful point around that double work, right? The physical, visually in a gallery space, but also the content that you actually have to now develop with a videographer and other aspects to now have that work arrive online. And sometimes those are missed pieces. And even when we apply for grants, when we think about, you know, that particular component, we actually sometimes don't think about what are the costs related to that? What are the costs related to actually having websites and digital spaces when our grant sometimes does not fund equipment purchase or maintenance? As I love this conversation because I think there are many ways that we're beginning to amplify this idea that seems so universal around digital content online, and you're like, there are lots of pieces, copywriting, right? Imagine someone coming, emerging artists now thinking about copywriting, when possibly they're also not taught about that in the training institutions they're coming out of, or the ways in which, you know, it's been one of my interesting critique around training institutions is while we train someone to be an artist, what about the other aspects related to their artistic practice that we can now begin to think about as they become quote unquote artists? And I think the digital space is shifting that as well. Give some thoughts there.
Well, I mean, that's why we exist. Like they teach you how to paint, but they don't teach you how to understand how to do your taxes or what the implications of copyright are, or like estate planning, or like any of the business side of art. And so, yeah, I will be interested to know like how moving things online will inform some of the professional practices work that is currently happening. I hope it is at least, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, I will say also that like we have been fairly lucky in visual arts compared to like performing arts. You know, going to a gallery is a bit like going to a grocery store. You can stay apart. You don't have to squish people in seats. A lot of galleries are already free, so we were not as reliant on ticket sales throughout the pandemic. Depending on where you lived in the country, like I said, I'm out on the West Coast. Like museums have been open since June 2020, so. There have been opportunities for visual artists to still have their work shown. Other regions, not so much. Shows have been canceled or delayed, but because we're not so reliant on like alternative revenue streams in visual arts as others are, I think there's been a lot more effort on behalf of galleries to really make sure that, okay, you have an exhibition that was supposed to be in person, now it's online, we're going to pay you the same fee, because that's the right thing to do. So hopefully. Yeah.
Thank you. And I want to bring in our next speaker into the conversation, because you mentioned some things. As I look at my screen, I'm like, oh, live streaming. And what does it mean to could you actually live stream an opening of a gallery? Or would you even consider live streaming a gallery opening in that particular moment? What is that? You know, I want to bring in Nina Jayarajan. I'm getting excited. Nina and I have been artists for a very, very long time. And Nina is an independent dance theater artist with extensive experience in Bharatanatyam and Odissi dance techniques. Her primary training was under the tutelage of Dr. Menaka Thakur and Sujata I'm going to pronounce that incorrectly, Mohapatra. And she served as the artistic director of Menaka Thakur Dance Company for 7 years. Welcome, Nina, because I know that moment in my collective physical history when Menaka decided to go live stream way before the pandemic and way before this digital conversation was happening. So could you tell us about that experience and some of the learnings and some of the ways you've also been thinking about monetizing digitally as well?
Absolutely. So yeah, the company I was raised in back in 2012, when both of them, the artistic director and the executive director, realized that after having a company for 40 plus years, creating so many works, and the majority of these works had a lot of dancers in them. So they were big scale productions. In order to remount them, costs a lot of money. And it's challenging to have to redo the pieces. And it required a lot of money. So they also, even the idea of touring these performances, finding venues that can handle it, the funding for the venues that's hosting us, like it became a thing where that was a challenge. So there, back in 2012, thought, you know what, we should try to reach these audiences and these locations through live streaming. And we're talking 2012. So, you know, there was no pandemic. Nobody really understood what that meant. And they didn't know why anyone would want to do that. So they applied to the Ontario Petroleum Foundation and received a grant to purchase live streaming equipment, which is what most of the money went to. Now, of course, great, we have this equipment and we start to do all this live streaming ideas. And as we know with technology, it goes obsolete, it has to be upgraded, we need new things to make it even better. So the costs just keep happening every year to keep up with the increased needs of live streaming. So of course, there were many great learnings. Most of it was learnings, a lot of challenges. They were big dreamers, the two of them. They weren't going to go small. They weren't going to do a black box theater to stream. They were like, we're going to stream to the Premier Dance Theater and we're going to stream a performance that was live streaming from India. So it was going to be thousands of people on one side, thousands of people on the other side. Of course, we're performing in art forms that are highly rhythm-based. Synchronization of music to footwork to audio were really important. And if they weren't perfect, it was heavily compromising the integrity of the art. And at a time when nobody understood any of these things. So it was a lot of trial and error. And then you're talking about, if you're live streaming a live performance back then, the lighting that was for the audience was not the same that we needed for the audience that was watching it from home. So where do we find those middle ground where everyone gets the great experience? And then the other thing we had, which was huge, was going into these venues like the Fleck Dance Theater or Premier Dance Theater. I don't remember what it was called back then. But in order for the stream to be smooth on both ends, the venue had to have a very high speed. And back then, the venues didn't have them. Very few places did. So here we are trying to lobby to these venues to get high-speed internet. And we're not talking about like the kinds we have at home. We need like, I forget the exact gigabytes because that's where my technology doesn't work well in my brain, but high speeds that these venues didn't have. So of course, these were the challenges. But the bigger challenges, I think, is trying to convince our audiences of thinking that this is a good idea. Forget monetizing. That was something that we couldn't even consider until we offered them free programming to understand the value and that it can be still something that holds the integrity. And of course, you know, there were ballet companies and the operas that were streaming their productions, but we're talking about multi-million-dollar company, you know, budgets to make this stuff happen. So how do we, as artists who are performing in cultural forms and companies who don't have as much access, get into these spaces and stream our content? in a way that still keeps the integrity of it. And also, the two of them were a part of an aging population. They also know the challenges they felt about going physically to see shows. So they were like, we want to access the people like us who don't want to drive downtown, find parking, blah, 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 all those things. How do we reach these people? How do we reach the communities that, Menaka used to travel from province to province teaching? She wanted to reach them again without having to physically travel to them every few months, because it's hard on all of us, and it was heavily expensive. So that was some of the challenges. And of course, the biggest challenge and the stuff we received in terms of feedback was that, oh, why would I watch it online if I could just watch it? It's not the same thing. We all know, we've all heard that. And it wasn't at a time when the pandemic, we had no choice, because there was still a choice. So of course, there was a lot of difficulty trying to bring in the audiences. And, back then, if there was a technical glitch, it wasn't taken as, it wasn't embraced warmly as it is now, because now we all understand it. We've all lived through it. We've all been forced to deal with it. So that was one of the biggest issues. And so one of the things we did do is try to start with classes. So teaching dance classes is where we kind of started all of our journey in a way that we knew was a little bit more of a controlled environment, because often we would fly in teachers from other countries. But then we dealt with issues like time zones, students being available at the same time as the teacher, making sure that the teacher's location had high-speed internet in these countries that maybe they didn't. So then finding locations for those teachers to travel to so they could access internet. So we had a hub in India, for instance, where we figured out the locations where they had high speed. So we would send these teachers to these places and access these venues. So all the things, there was a lot of challenges around all that. And of course, I mentioned the sound, the music. We experimented with having mics on one side. How do we make sure that when the teacher is counting a beat for the dancers that are dancing, how does it match up? Whose side should we mute? These are things that we didn't know back then. 2012, it was a long time ago, a lifetime ago. But that was some of the challenges that we faced. And God bless them. We lost them both in the last year. And at a point when they couldn't, they were starting to understand and feel appreciated for their technology and their leaps and bounds that they were talking about, is when we lost them both during a pandemic. So I bow my hats to them for thinking of these things back when it wasn't a thing. And we are, benefiting from the labor that they did and all the research that they did. Eventually, they did rent out their equipment to Toronto Dance Theatre and other companies to use the equipment to try to live stream each of their individual shows. And that was one of the ways they did monetize on it. But yeah, there was always the challenges, and I know that they're thinking, oh, man, we just missed it, so yeah, that's kind of what I'll share for now about my journey.
Thank you. Yes, rest their souls. Having been impacted by both of them significantly since we were teenagers dancing in a piece. It means a lot that to actually have them honored in this particular way, in this particular space. You sort of touched on it, and I'm just curious about this idea of working with like a larger another more resourced organization like TDT and renting out the equipment. What are some of, if you're familiar with what that was, you mentioned feedback. What was the feedback from TDT using this particular equipment? Did they see a different response to their live streaming capabilities or to the things that they were trying to do with the live streaming technology than Menaka Thakur's company did?
That's a good question. Actually, I don't know. I know that they were very appreciative of the technology, and it thankfully went glitch free at a time. We're talking like 6-7 years ago. So we're like, we were always just like, just don't glitch. That's all we wanted. No lags, the internet, all that. That was like the biggest goal. But it was a level of access. I'm not sure how many, I know they had a good number of people access the live stream. But the thing is, when we're renting out the equipment, we have to send a technician, a camera person, a blah, a blah, a blah, so we do have to set up our own team. So that team, again, costs money. So, there's this so the money that we're trying to save in like remounting works with 7 dancers, 8 dancers, and all the things, it's hard to, it was a juggling act of balancing the finances for sure. And I think in the now times, there would have been a way to figure it out. But in those days, it was a difficult journey for sure. Yeah.
Visionaries.
Visionaries, yes.
You also mentioned something I wanted to throw back into the conversation, not necessarily for you to respond to, but if you want to, you can, is this idea of an aging population and how we assume that they're going to be responding the same way that younger populations do with this idea of digital technology or that a particular experience. Being a dancer myself, I often have the conversation about IBPOC bodies and their fear of the internet. So their fear of actually paying for something online. Like, you don't just enter your credit card and suddenly magic appears. Like they go, no, my information will be stolen, and how that impacts the nature of the possibility of working and monetizing digitally online, especially for IBPOC individuals, because it's not a part of that particular psyche of just going, sure, here's my credit card information, it exists online. And also aging populations, and especially from ethno-racial or cultural backgrounds, where we interact with the arts differently. And so we may interact also different with monetizing the arts, but also the engagement that we're trying to provide online digitally. They want to be in the space and they want to interact and they want to say, yes, I know Nina, because since she was a child, and how that actually impacts the very same things we're talking about around monetizing and digitizing, and actually that particular experience, which we know in the pandemic has been a really, really challenging one. So thank you. If you have any further thoughts you want to add to that.
Yeah, I would just comment on that. That was definitely one of the challenges. Anyone who is over a certain age was like, how do I get this live stream ticket? It was always a thing, to the point where we would just tell them, we'll buy it for you. Here's the link, just click on it. You can pay us when you see us, that kind of thing. And then we decided that we would have actual viewing venues, so that if they wanted to watch it, they could come to a theater in their local area and they would all meet in that area. So they could feel like they're still physically going, but they don't have to travel all the way downtown and find parking. There's a lot of things that come with that generation, a lot of barriers that they don't want to actually physically venture. Or we would say, do you want to have a viewing party at your home? We will have one of our people come and help set these things up. And if you gather 10 people, we will come and do this for you. So this was like the extent of the kind of things we were just trying. So it was a lot of labor, for sure, a lot of labor of love. But it was more about changing a mentality. Because when you're trying to change the mentality against the grain, it was challenging for sure. And, you're talking about the challenges of, do they want to pay online? It's so much more. Like then they had to depend on their children to help them do it. And so, the 2 people that ran the organization, even they would have struggled to do it. They're like, make it easy, make it one click. Laurence did speak of this in our chat earlier, but she was saying, they don't all have credit cards. We're talking about access. How do we make it accessible if we are asking for credit card information? And that, a generation that has doubts about things like that. They want to pay with paper bills and like receive a physical ticket, right? So sometimes we would actually physically go to their homes and try things like that. Like we offered that to them as a way to make it accessible, but it's not, it's a lot of labor, a labor of love though.
And thank you, because I think there's some beautiful suggestions for anyone who's listening who may be curious about monetizing online. Maybe it is creating a team that organizes the viewing party, right? And do that work, execute that work for cultural bodies that are think about it differently. Maybe it is a team that actually says, yes, we'll do this for you. Also, could you, as you mentioned in programming, could you create a small video content that guides someone through your website about how to do it? Because you know that some of these things are clicking and next link, and it's even for maybe us who are very much interacting with these things, we're like, okay, come on, really another one? And then I have to go and you're gonna send me a thing on an email, and then like, it takes a lot, you know? So how do we begin to think about actually making it accessible, as you mentioned, to monetize it in a way that is meaningful for artists and our organizations as well? So you're also offering some solutions within those challenges that I really, really admire. I want to bring into the conversation here. Thank you, Nina. Thank you so much. I want to bring into the conversation Laurence Lemieux, who is the artistic director of Citadel and Company for nearly 2 decades, and has established herself as a leader within the Toronto dance community. Her multifaceted experience as a dancer, choreographer, teacher, and presenter has guided the company's mandate of community outreach and engagement, and had given rise to C+C's distinctive artistic voice, but also the access provided to other organizations through their website, through their online platforms, through their performances, for which I, who as AD of a company, Cassia Dance, is completely grateful to be a company in residence at the Citadel. It's both a studio space, a performance space, a venue. It's many things. And so I want to also invite Laurence to come into the conversation, because I know I've been there through many of these iterations of things, the performances and the shoot and the filming and the, you know, so come into the conversation if you don't mind, and share some of your experiences and thoughts on monetizing and digitizing content for this era that we're moving into.
I'm so digital that I was muted. Thank you, Kevin, for the introduction. And it was really quite inspiring to hear Nina speak about her history and her experience with Manaka Takar. And although I knew of this, it's really, oh my God, we actually have been doing the same things, but I didn't, anyways, we'll talk later about all this. But yeah, so I think that for us, for the company, our relationship to live streaming really came out of a sort of a desire that was prompted by the pandemic. Like, I'm not going to lie and say we thought about it 20 years ago, we didn't. But right at the onset of the pandemic, we started this thing called Citadel Online, which was free access to some of the performances that we had produced at the Citadel. And we had a system of people would make donations, and 75% would go directly to the artists, and we kept 25% to pay the people running the program. And that was more or less sort of successful. It gave simply the opportunity to keep artists engaged and make a bit of money, not a lot, but still a bit. But as the pandemic went on, you know, I decided that we would do live streams, and I was super innocent about, you know, we didn't have any experience in live streaming. I'm lucky to be friends with Barbara Willis-Sweet, who was doing live streams at the Met in New York since probably, I would say, I think she started in 2009 or 2010, because the Met did a lot of opera live streams. So I went to meet her to ask her for advice on how to build a small team at the Citadel. And unfortunately, or fortunately, she says, I'll direct them. And I was like, what? No, this is not the Met. So it was really extraordinary, really, because it wasn't I was just thinking more she would guide us through the process, but she was desperate to get involved and to build a team at the Citadel. So we applied for money, to get some equipment. And our first live stream that we did during night shift, we had 400 views. And to us, that was hugely successful because our theater has 50 seats. So I was like, oh my God, it's like we did 8 shows in one night. And I mean, it was a lot more money and a lot more work, but it was really interesting how And, you know, at the time it was a pandemic, people were desperate to connect. But I guess the thing I wanted to talk a little bit more about is that there's a real sense that when you talk to a lot of dance artists, it's like, well, you can't film dance. There's a bit of a defeatist, like, dance is such an art form of the moment, of the texture, of the humanity. Like, how can you possibly film that? And I was like stubborn. I'm still stubborn. I was thinking, how about we try? Like, how about we actually make it better than their life experience? I think giving access to the audience, to closeness, to close-ups, to like a drop of sweat, to a clothing angle. So I think that Barbara's expertise as a live streamer for large opera meant that, and her experience in filming dance in particular, meant that she had the tools to guide us through, how do you shoot this movement? Like, is it, where is the camera coming from? So Barbara's process was to script every second of the way. So it was never, nothing was improvised. It was extremely scripted. But what it offered our audience is a real experience. And we pursued that experience with Sarita Hector's Black Ballerina. And that, in November of 2020, we had 2,000 views in 24 hours. So, but again, all of that was free. So since the topic today is monetizing, in the fall of 2021, we started to put a paywall for our live streams, $4.99. And we actually have built a platform that we feel is pretty barrier-free, but it's never barrier-free because you have to pay. But easier access, but still, we still have the, how do you do this? And when Nina was talking about, like, you know, my thing is, if my mom can't figure it out, then it doesn't work, because, you know, my mom's on Facebook, but she's 85, and if she can't figure it out, then we have a problem. That means it's not actually accessible. So we've built a platform with InPlayer. We rebuilt our whole website as well. That is, it has, in my opinion, fewer steps than others, but I will be very frank in saying that when it was free, it was essentially, you go on the website and here it is. So one thing I wanted to talk about, because in the earlier conversation, like, one of the issues we discovered as well is the music rights, because a lot of the choreographers were using musics that they didn't clear the rights for. So, which is something that you're not supposed to do anyway in a live theater, but online it's even more crucial. So we've had to juggle that. And in fact, what we've decided to do at times is just to simply hire a composer, a local Canadian Toronto composer, to compose the music so that the dance can be performed, because a lot of artists would be using music that they didn't have the rights to, and it's something that you shouldn't do anyway, but online then you get shut down. So and we're still live streaming, and I think now we're entering a phase of finding, because there's less desperation about sharing content since we're slowly coming back to the theaters. So what I find interesting now is to think about, how creative can we be? How can we further the access? So one idea that we're developing is to have screens outside of the Citadel that will live stream the inside content for free. So people on Parliament Street will see the live stream. You didn't know that, Kevin. I'm just telling you now. For free. So that's another interesting, or maybe within the building. So maybe not everyone is comfortable being in close proximity in the theater. Maybe they want to hang out in the lobby and see it at their own comfort in a way. And I'll just end by saying that through all of this, we've discovered a lot of our audience actually prefer now to stay at home and watch shows from their house. And we don't want to stop doing it, because that's actually really, really great, because there's people who are either they don't want to travel, or they live farther, or they have mobility issues, and they love watching dance at their home. So yeah, it's just juggling all that.
Thank you so much. That is a lot. And what's a lot in that is, I've often said that I think when we move out of Western colonial structures of presenting and thinking about artwork and presenting work, we have to think about making it accessible on those streets to the persons who want to engage with art, to see themselves differently. So I feel that in this conversation, we're also, bumping up on two things: access, monetizing, and also the traditional ways in which we've been presenting work, right? Because if now persons want to stay home to experience digital content, what does it mean to these grand, beautiful spaces that we have called theaters? Large things that are concrete that people have been coming in and out of. How will that change that relationship? And also as a presenter, I think it's also, how will it change that relationship for your organization in being a presenter and presenting? So I think this digital content and digital space is a really interesting one, because it's about the shift. We're talking about molding the future differently, and being aware of some of the implications that working digitally will now have on both physical presentations, but also online presentations. I have a question for you, Laurence. You're not getting away that easy. And the question is simply around, you have the experience now with this, and I know you do. What are some of the production/budget considerations to consider when presenting or thinking about having your work go online digitally? Because you mentioned your work with Martha, and I can't imagine that there's a filming, now suddenly there's a 2-week filming process where you're filming for a week, but you're maybe presenting for a week, and that shifts your budget, or how you might be thinking about applying for a grant, or applying for a production grant to do your work. Do you have any advice and suggestions for artists and arts organizations to think about in that regard?
Well, when we worked with Barbara, she brought a crew of camera operators that came from the TV world, who were experienced TV/dance camera operators, which meant that they didn't have to rehearse that much. They just get the script, and they've done that their whole lives, right? So as you know, dance takes a lot of rehearsal and a lot of time. So preparing the camera is also preparing the artist to be filmed. But these kinds of great live stream, they're not financially sustainable just because they're really, really expensive, just because of the nature of the crew and the camera equipment that you have to rent. So we're in this place where we're just trying to figure out how to make both. So we have applied for funds, we have some cameras. But I would say that the approach should be just as any creator approaches creation. Like, it's not because you have an iPhone that you're a filmmaker. And that's one of the biggest challenges, is that every person has an opinion about film, as if they know what they're doing, but they actually are not filmmakers. They're just maybe talented with their iPhones. And I think it's been really humbling to meet people who've been working their whole lives in film and actually have a trade, and they actually can teach you how to respect that in a certain way, if that makes any sense. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I guess, like, yes, it takes resources, but I think more than anything, you need to be aligned with a good filmmaker that will understand your vision, and for which you can work with comfortably. Like, it's really almost like finding your lighting designer, or finding, like, it's the same kind of thing. You need to be able to work well with that person. And you asked a question about the money. I don't know. I guess it costs so much more money to make films. It's just, and it's a whole, I don't know that business, so I can't really, like, it's a whole other thing. What we did is try to elevate the dance that was happening within our walls while there was a pandemic.
Thank you, because I think it's a whole nother, it's a beast. I think the understanding the financial implications of like what goes into having 3 filmmakers come into the studio space it's huge, right? What in our conversation, this never actually came to me until we're having this conversation, is this also this idea about preparing the artist to be filmed? Because I think when you work in a physical practice or when you work in visual arts or any practice at all, we're used to working in a physical space, in a theater space in these particular ways. But those angles shift or change completely. As the lights that Nina was talking about, all that shifts and changes, and lighting designer gets involved, and that's not the light that I want for the mood, or there's many things around also then thinking about as we begin to monetize and begin to create content, how do we also begin to train the artist to understand their relationship to that digitization of a form that they've now experienced and have been experiencing as a physical form in a theater space? And so what as arts organizations and artists can begin to do is to think also about that from the onset of writing a grant, from the onset of being funded. How long does a filmmaker need to come into the creation space to understand the nuances of the work? We're talking about IBPOC creators. For someone like myself who has this ritual of ceremony in a practice, that requires a lot of understanding of what it means. It's not just walking and filming. So it's an invitation, but it also complicates the invitation. And I think there's a beautiful thing, as April was also mentioning, around educating and how early in one's artistic journey do these education begin. I want to bring in our last speaker into the conversation, and I'm super excited. I'm excited because I think this is one of the angles that not many artists and arts organizations think about as they begin to think about creating content and design thinking and so many other things that is involved in this digital content piece, which is so key. We often don't think about those who are designing that content, those who are strategizing that content for people to interact with. And so I want to bring into the conversation Aaliyah Erica Clark, who's a business strategist and development coach who founded AJ Cultured, a rapidly growing organization that provides a wide range of services for small business owners. And what I love in that conversation is the idea of business. I think what we're looking at monetizing, many arts organizations do not consider themselves business. They're an arts organization, not for profit. I would even go further to say that I think in thinking about copywriting and monetizing, that the CRA will have to begin to think about the implications of the ways in which they may expect not-for-profit organizations to monetize on digital content. It's a side lobbying conversation that I know April must be like, because it implicates, right? We can't as not-for-profit organizations be thinking about for-profit. So it has to go somewhere. It has to go back into programming. There's a lot of complications. I think this shift in our future, where the art as monetizing and making money, and CRA and filing and all that processes, Kodak and all of them need to begin to think differently about the future and how we're thinking about the future in the arts. So Aaliyah, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to my fellow panelists for your shares, and just want to make sure you guys can hear me clearly because I've got the windows open because it's really beautiful today in Toronto. So I definitely want to delve into, thank you, Kevin, for such an introduction. So as you can tell, I have a background. And so I make it known who I am. If you're like, what's that? Let me look it up. And so one of the companies, and what makes me a subject matter expert about digital design, is my company called Cultureneek. And so Cultureneek is literally a cultured experience that is unique to you as a client. And so when I think of design, I think of what are we trying to do with design? What are we aiming to do with reaching our clients and growing our reach and being able to create a stream of income? And so as a structurist and a strategist, we look at things as we're growing, we have to look for money, and it's like we have this disconnect or detach from, money, but we know we need it, right? And so when we think of content, if you notice here, I have 4 logos. One of the last logos is actually called the Name Cubator. It came about because most people, when they think about naming their brand, they don't actually think about the usability of the name. And so something as simple as the name itself, who you are as a brand. When I say I'm Cultureneek, that means that anything that I use, Cultureneek will be a stamp on it. And so understanding even that aspect gets into the conversation of trademarking, not just the name, but the art that follows the name. And so I touch on these aspects because it really comes down to the foundation of an artist. Who are you? What are you trying to convey with your artistry? And who are you trying to reach? And so when we think about the art that we've known in past times prior to pandemic, there's a lot of traditional art that we really appreciate, but then it is a disconnect from the actual usability of all those that are trying to find some connection. Because that's ultimately what it is connection. This is how are we connecting? How are they connecting with us? And so when we think about our digital brands, we are thinking about the actual power of the name itself, the power of the product. And so there's so much, and I won't touch on it all because I was like, I looked up I looked up everything, and I was like, wow, we're not really touching on the actual digitizing of art, which is in forms of such things as NFTs and digital arts and actual content creation on a digital form. So even in our videos, having a signature, having our trademark logo, having those things, those stamps are what's important. We're not thinking about, oh, should I trademark my art or should I copyright my art? But that should be an actual a process that we should actually be instilling in how we're moving forward with our content. Can I put my little signature and stamp, my little logo right there in the middle where you cannot undeniably erase it, even no matter how much you try, right? Those things are important, even in what we're saying, the content, the song, all of those things can have underlying copywritten information that is embedded in the digital aspect. That's also the part that we're not seeing. We just see the artistry. But there's actually content and there's content and code that is assigned to the digital footprint. And so those are things that we're not considering because we're just seeing it. We're just, oh, it's right in front of us. And so when we're thinking about our content, how are we digitizing it in a way that we could attach our signature and our footprint to it? And so I have so much I could delve into with regards to this, and I won't because I'm like, I'm going to touch on so many different things. And so 3 of my ways that I understand content is how are we reaching them, right? In today's day and age, our attention spans are like rapidly short. But if you can keep us, you can keep us for 3 minutes. You can keep us for 5 minutes. You can keep us for 10 minutes if the content is engaging. And so now there's a disconnect of, is the content like, oh, is my sole purpose of doing this is to entertain people? Or, am I, just here to particularly be solely entertainment purposes? Or am I trying to illustrate the beauty of my artistry to people who want to interact with it? Notice the 2 are 2 different mindsets. One is I want to connect. The other one is I have to connect, right? And so now it's this drudgery that comes along with the practice of, oh, but I have to do this and I have to do this. And oh my God, there's so much stuff to do. Versus like the willingness of actually making it easier for them to interact with you or to interact with your product by any which way, right? And so I have 3 forms of entertainment. Of course, entertainment can be very vast, very broad. We have art-utainment, we have art-attainment, we have edutainment. Now, when we think of these things, it could be very vast in the fact that when we think of art-utainment, you're teaching people about art. And I'm going to share my screen if I have access to. I think I do. Awesome, yes. All right, so I am going to be on my Facebook because, of course, I'm on social media. So, oh, and I have to make sure to share my sound so you can hear this. Sharing my sound, awesome. Okay, so many of you are appreciative of opera, maybe. I am. I grew up with classical. My sister was a dancer, and literally she went to U of Arts, and she was literally, I was in her duffel bag all the time. So this is also how I met Kevin. So, you know, having a sister who is just always in the arts, I grew up with an appreciation for it. But you know, back then versus now, it's like, are people really connecting to opera and the history of it and the classical music and the beauty of it, you know, the connection? And so now we come into Baba Tunde. If you guys are following him or not following him, I encourage you to. He's known as the hip opera. He is the gentleman that merges the culture of opera and also merges the culture of relativity to the IBPOC community. So when we look at one of his reels, a gentleman, you know, challenged him. And if you see there's a side by side, it's because he's actually it's what's known as remixing. He's remixing content that was created by someone else, but then he's adding his flavor to it. So then now he's educating people on the actual process itself. So if we imagine Mozart. Can you guys hear the sound? Okay, so now we have a gentleman who's interested in music. He does music, but he's also into Afrobeats, which is a newer genre within the last few decades. And so now, about Afrobeats. So now we take this classical operatic scene, and now we're merging it to something. And now it's like, now we're bringing them in, we're drawing them in. And now what are we doing? We're creating likes. We are creating viewership. We have 48,000 views just off of a remix. Now, again, you know, it is a simple 22 seconds, but look how much it has expanded. And his caption alone can really gauge people. So every time people see this 122-second video, now we're drawing into 48,000 eyes, sets of eyes that are seeing this, you know. And so now when we think about that, we are wanting to make sure that even if it's a taste, a teaser, while you guys are doing your live streams, you know, having an interjection of like, hey guys, whip out your phone. Let's go ahead and do a reel. Tell us a story. During intermission, go ahead and let us know how you're engaging. Why? Because now they're going to want to know. It's in their feed. It's in their reel. Now you've actually asked your subscribers to come in and say, hey, I'm going to be participatory in this event, and I want people to know how awesome it is. And I get it. Yes, we do have an educational barrier that there's that transition that we have to. But then again, we're drawing the people in to enjoy those that have enjoyed it for years so far. So we're creating that merge, right? We're creating that connection so that they have a connection to what was once considered old, but now have given it a new approach, a new flavor, a new vibrance to it, to then revitalize the life of it, to then be enjoyable by new followers. So now you have new subscribers that are, wow, I never thought of opera that way, right? I've never thought to merge opera with this particular type of genre of music. And so we come into the actual, and I touched on this with April moments ago in our conversation about when we look at NFTs. And man, it's a beast in and of itself. And trust me, that could be its own conference. But I will gently touch on the digitizing via virtual reality, which when we think about Decentraland, we think of virtual reality. These are another way. And so I won't play too long of this, but this is another way that we can take art and bring it into the virtual realm and let people connect to it. And so we have this amazing graffiti artist who literally has now taken his art, doesn't have to have supplies, and he is able to tap into these places where he's able to connect with people who are on this virtual reality experience with him. And if you notice, he's able to sell this as an NFT. One, he's visually showing you that he's the one creating it. So that again is a stamp. Boop, it's mine. The other part is that when it's decentralized, you actually have no one else in there telling you, I'm going to take your proceeds or your income. That's the thing about blockchains. Blockchains are so so coded that it's not your standard 120 bit security. It's actually more than the blockchain itself is impenetrable for hacking. And so when we think about NFTs, if an artist were to post their NFTs, such as various artists that actually have worked with producers, they've gone and they've decided to release one song via NFT, and they've made more income from selling their own NFT than actually having their producers sell it. And so then it gives them the right, the ownership for them to actually capitalize on using the NFT blockchain medium to which then they connect to their clients. Now I have this authentic product, because that's the other thing, that digital stamp that I told you about, that comes with your NFT, which proves the ownership, which proves that, is this being stolen? And the validity of claim. You have to release your NFT. And so with that being yours, then that's a way that you're saying, this is mine and no one else can take it. And so this is an example of him creating art and then being able to sell it as an NFT in a digital realm. And trust me, this goes even farther. The realm of NFT, like I said, NFT is like super, super intense. And so again, growing up with a dancer, always loved Josephine Baker and loved a lot of the older, the more classical jazz musicians and artists. And so we have this young lady, she's a makeup artist. Makeup in and of itself is art. And so when she's simply just using the art of storytelling, she is educating an entire new generation of people through simple application of makeup. And so when we listen to her, it's a 12-minute video.
Would go throughout the Midwest performing, and they would also bring Josephine with them, and she became really good at entertaining from a very young age. And then her mom got sick of it. She was like, listen, Eddie, we're not making any money, like this is getting old. And Eddie's like,
she has a ring light and literally is just telling you a story. She knows a story like the back of her hand, and she is just having a chill out session with you. So when we talk about accessibility of having equipment, then we literally look at influencers. This is another part. Influencers help us to monetize our content because they are literally getting the viewership that allows them to get you captured to then lead you to more. She has had 1.9 million views since the 29th of April, just telling the story of Josephine Baker. And she's applying makeup, and that's all she's doing, sitting down and telling you stories, adding pictures here or there, which then are simple applications that can enhance just simple content, right? So 75,000 likes or responses. Does your art create art? And I say that meaning, let's break down the word ART. Does your art create an action? Does your art create a reaction? Does your art create a transaction? And so when we have reactions, we have our likes. When we have our actions, they're sharing it, they're commenting, they're viewing it, they're letting people know. Are they transacting? She's a influencer, so she's gotten her blue check from Instagram and Facebook. But guess what? Now when people go to follow her, she has access to them, to then tell them to come offline, come off of these platforms, come to my haven so I can make you a subscriber. And when I can make you a subscriber, you know what I can do? I can sell directly to you for the things that I know you want me to give to you because of my storytelling of Josephine Baker. And that's the thing about social media and those platforms that may be intimidating, is that we have to put on this performance and then we have to show them and show and tell, and that. No, but there's more strategy to it. What captivates them to taste? Oh, I like that. That was awesome. That was a good enactment. How can I know more? Come to my URL. Let me go ahead and have this digital experience for you so that you can come down a funnel. Funneling is one of those things that most people are like, I hate it. Like Kevin said earlier, I was like, are we done yet? This is, I got here. Another one, right? But the funneling is actually a marketing strategy that is very universal and is commonly used. But again, if you have the access to those emails, you have access to the power to which then you have direct connection. Because as you remember last year, specifically, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, kaputs, went down. What happens when you actually need to reach your clients, or you want to know that, hey, I'm still here, even though Facebook isn't, right? And so that in and of itself is then now you don't have to worry about these social media platforms because you've drawn them off. You've built your subscriber list. You can let them know, hey, Facebook might not be here, but I am. Hey, are you listening to some music lately? Have you created art? Here's something that you can go back and see some of our performances while this Facebook thing is down, right? So now you're able to revisit old content by even just having them engage with the downness of certain things, right? Because you have their access to their emails. The other aspect that we talk about is teaching, the artainment, right? How do we teach them about art? We have here a young lady who is, I mean, she's hitting some notes. So we have a voice teacher. I mean, giving me chills. I don't know if you guys are like that. But if you notice, he actually gives her teaching points of what exactly makes her song dynamic. Now not only is this entertaining, again, this comes into the remix aspect. Her voice is angelic, it's beautiful. Now we literally see the actual points that we would have never thought of. Her voice is full, but she's not even using any weight to it, right? And so now we can see from an actual educator's perspective of the artistry, and it's just content. 144,000 likes just because he broke down Kiki Wyatt's song, right? And so now we have people that are interested, like, oh, I want to sing like that. Please, again, engaging, drawing them in onto a product that says, hey, I was touched by that. How can I be involved? Again, it's giving them that taste, that teaser. It's like you coming to dinner and I'm saying, and April talked about pies. Ooh, if she had a really great apple pie, let me give you a spoonful. Ooh, that spoonful. And then next, you know, you're like, let me get a slice. Oh, let me buy a pie, right? And that's exactly what some of our content is. We're not giving it all away. We're giving you a teaser to say, hey, I know you like this. Come on over to this beautiful house. We've got something for you, right? And so again, it comes down to strategy and understanding how you're going to reach those actual clients. And so I don't know if you guys know about Syncopated Ladies. Again, growing up with a dancer in my household who did everything, I love tap. Me, on the other hand, I'm trying to teach my son how to tap. But at the same time, it's taking what's old and a beautiful art and creating it and mixing it. So yes, we do talk about, you know, the copyrights and do they have rights to it? But then when you have the actual artists repost you because, you've done something they haven't done, now you have what's known as collaboration. So now the artist is taking you in because the artist isn't really against you using and providing more reach for them. It's the fact that the people that are restricting them from earning properly for their artistry, which has nothing to do with the followers, has everything to do with the people that own the rights to it. So that's another conversation, but I more so want to speak specifically about collaboration. We see here, and this is again, Chloe Arnold. Now, some of these videos are only recorded on iPhones. So this is the beautiful part, is like some of the artistry doesn't take a lot. It's literally, they set up outside, beautiful sunny day, choreographed content, as well as, this catchy song that was really great. Again, 2020 song came out, let's do it, right? We remix it, 4.1 million followers. But you know what? If you follow Syncopated Ladies, that 4.1 transfers into, are you enrolling in the next TAP conference that we're hosting? Where they sell out because the people want specifically to learn how to tap to the latest hip hop song, right? So now we're merging, we're collaborating. Oh, they perform for Beyonce, I want to be with them. And so now the collaboration of artists are now drawing in a combined community that not only likes the music, but loves the art as well. So 100, again, is your art giving art? Does your art invoke art? Does it invoke action? Does it invoke reaction? Does it invoke transaction, right? Are people being able to turn from followers into subscribers, into paid clients, right? And so the last person that I would like to eat is when we go into edutainment, right? This is a 3-minute video, but if you know Amari Guichon, you know that this is not done in 3 minutes. We all know that literally his artwork, if you are not following him, he's a chocolatier that literally can make masterpieces. I mean, anywhere from a ballerina all the way to a chandelier, and the fine-tuned details of it. And I'll just jump to the end, because literally the amount of work that he thinks of just to create so having the ability to know how to use and leverage cell phones, right? It's cutaways. It's literally like, I'm gonna record 2 seconds here, 2 seconds here, or recording the whole thing and being able to edit it down. And so as and if you want to see the final masterpiece, and this is all chocolate, right? And so you sit here and you see, I love this. But you know what he's doing? He's showing you the amazing awesomeness of creating artworks and artistry from chocolate. But then he's also 3 minutes captivating you to now, let's see, we have 23,000 followers, 25 million views since April 9th. So this is, again, the power of creating content that captivates, but also content, it's still tasteful. There's nothing about it. And that's the thing too, is like we come into social media and we see that, oh, I've got to do all this drudgery and I've got to do all this work. But in actuality, if you have a captivating product, you have a captivating name, you are actually treating it as though it's a business, you then can now reach audiences that would have never even found you because of the vast availability of the amount of subscribers and viewers that can see you that would have never seen you in the corner of your world, right? And so as a digital content creator, as a professional, I find that it's very important that we look at the overall picture. We look at how are we converting our consumers into subscribers, and how are they becoming our best storytellers to tell about their experiences about interacting with our art. And so to wrap up, I definitely was like, I want to be close to time. And so there's so much to, you know, monetizing our digital content. It is so much more to not just seeing the traditional art, but also feeling the need to adapt to then draw the caption of that artistry into today's artistry, which is it's not very different. It's simply just finding a new medium to which we can connect to our viewers.
Thank you for, okay, it's Thursday. You went to church. It ain't Sunday yet. Thank you. I think my mind is blown. I am like, oh, wow. But I just want to refer something back to, which is this idea of, does your art create art? An action, a reaction, a transaction? I think we're arriving in a moment with using digital space and also with our artistic practice where it's been huddled and it's precious. It's been precious. It's like, oh, this is my art. It just belongs with me. And then I share it when I choose to with the world. And you're actually suggesting there are many other aspects and ways in which that art can be shared with the world. The snippets of it, the little pieces of it. But what you're also doing, and thank you for doing that, is, I mean, I have a privilege of having, again, a communications and political science degree. The branding, how you begin to link the mandates, the branding, the things that the vision statements to the actual art making processes, and how that then arrives in a digital space. There's something magical in that. I have a quick question for you. Don't take too long, don't take too long, but you can take long. I think we're going into some other moments. We're going to open it up also to audience members and participants must have questions they want to ask of the panelists, and maybe you want to ask questions of each other as well. Are you seeing any shifts in the ways in which generations are experiencing digital content?
Yes, absolutely. I was just thinking about when Nina was saying about having to go out to people's homes and like literally help them, like, hey, this is how you click here, click, click. Okay, gotcha, right? It takes me back to the email era, right? Where it's like, I have an email, like, and nowadays it's like, I didn't even bring up TikTok. I didn't even mention TikTok. And so when we think about TikTok, it's like, oh, that thing, it's just like, the email thing. And that's what I'm seeing is that there's this, I'm too out of reach for that hip stuff. I'm too out of reach for that new stuff. And you can see it in the generations where it's like, at one point, our parents were like, I don't need an email, right? And then now it's like, we're in this age, it's like, I'm too young, I'm too old for TikTok, right? And so now we're seeing the transformation of where it's accessing, where it's going. You have people who do lives on just their reels. I didn't touch too much on it because during the pandemic, my pandemic career was actually something called the Live Mat Party. And I taught yoga and I teamed up with DJs around the world. And when I did that, it was just now people are like, I would have never gone to South Africa. And now they know of a South African DJ. And so it's understanding the power of connection and you having to know, okay, I might not really be a TikToker, but maybe I can help or employ someone who does TikTok. And now I can connect to because that's the thing too. You want to be able to have a product that can reach everyone. One of the things that we do at Culturenique when we're actually launching your product is that we make sure you're on the big six. The big six: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and TikTok. People are like, Pinterest? It's like, I don't do pin boards, but there's a lot of people that do. Or I don't do LinkedIn, I don't have a corporate job, but there's a lot of people that do. It's people that stay off Facebook and Instagram and only interact with Twitter. And so when now we have people that are really skillful, again, it comes down to that collaboration. How do you connect to the people on those mediums that, are raising with the generation, right? Because TikTok wasn't what it was until like last year. But now how do we connect to them, plus the people who are still just on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram? And so we have to find those ways to then invite people, again, our audiences. Again, that's what I say. When you have something that's happening at your place or at your venue or your gallery, you then have your audience connect to who they connect to. And then it becomes this chain reaction that then now people are seeing this because they're on TikTok and they did a live, they did a reel. And so now you're asking the audience to do the work for you. So that in this case, they can connect to who they are close to and you can still connect to them. And then now you have this chain reaction.
Yes, and you know, I'm mindful of when I danced with Ballet Creole and working in the school system, that the big question I still ask, even as an artist and as an administrator, who is your future audience? You know, because again, these are some of the ways in which they're interacting. And so part of it, I think some of the resistance that we see with many other historical organizations or ways in which other persons are working is, it takes a little bit of learning, you know, like, I'm like, I can't be Instagram thing. You know, I'd love to post, but I give tons of respect to content creators. And all I keep asking is, how do they do it? Man, I try to post a vid, I gotta do all these things. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is really great. But what, again, the future audience are interacting in these particular ways. Does any of the panelists have any other comments or you know, new discoveries, questions for each other? We'll open it up. We'll also open it up to those in the room. If you have questions for any of the panelists, you could drop them in the chat and I'll read it out to the particular panelists. I will not say who you are or your name, or you can also private message me the question if you don't want to have that question assigned to you in the general space. After such a, like, nobody have question. You see, I can't, but I do these things. I've done, nah, do these no more. Because you invited people to ask questions and nobody want to ask. And you know they have questions, you know. I have a question out there. You all have questions, burning questions. And we invite them. This is a space, it's a conversation. Nina, I see you with your...
No, I was just going to say, you know, something that just in seeing what just happened now, like, you know, we're doing these live stream performances where we see them on Zoom, you know, and that is one of the challenges when we want to see people's faces because we're performing to the screen and often we don't. And so we lose that feeling. That's the thing. Those are the things that we're missing when we're not performing in live spaces. We're looking at names or profile pictures, which is, and I totally get it. Sometimes I'm like making dinner while I'm watching something or I'm listening in on these things. And I, you know, so I feel both sides of that. So it's like, how do we find ways to keep both sides feeling like they're still doing the work that they feel is integral and feel like they're doing it from a place of passion and not losing that connection. And we're constantly trying to find ways to keep the connection. And I think that, yeah, it's, you know, it's like, you know, there's people in a live audience when, you know, someone decides to come from the stage into the audience and there's always the people who are like, oh my God, don't come to me. And then there's the people who are like, oh, they're coming to the audience, you know? So I feel like there's the shift has happened more so now in this pandemic with the people who were like, I just, you know, want to kind of hide behind my screen a bit. So I'm wondering, like, we keep seeing the shifts. Initially in the pandemic, there was a lot of things that people were happy and comfortable doing. And now in this stage of it, there's more transitions. I'm curious on what's going to happen in the next stage, where everything's constantly evolving and we keep having to evolve and change with the digital things and elements that keep happening. Yeah, so it's just curious. I'm curious to see where it'll go.
Yes. April, any thoughts?
No, I mean, it's interesting to see like the different ways that people are promoting and marketing their stuff. And it's not by just showing a clip, you know, like the number of times I've seen theaters just have a reel of like clips of scenes from the show. I don't want to see that. That's not, I want to see the show. But I appreciate the kinds of things that you were just sharing where it's like way more engaging, that you want to find out more about the person who made it or about the story, and then you go to the show. Like, I think that is an interesting approach to it for sure in terms of getting people excited. I don't know how much energy people have anymore. Are you tired? I sure am. Well, that's tired.
That's the other part too, is that artists are solopreneurs. And most of the industry is built off of people who are solopreneurs. If you look at any business, right, it's not run off of one person. At the very least, it's not run off the executive team either, right? And so that's why I say collaboration, because if you collaborated with Nina and you guys put your sources together, now you're pulling everyone into one sphere instead of trying to individually, maximize your efforts for your respective organizations. So teaming up is like, yeah, you're like, oh man. And that's why I say, even at your events, it's literally inviting an influencer who's local. Like, hey, I'd love to, for you to do a review or do a feature, or, and I'm not even sure how many of you are still doing press releases. So that's another way in which the press releases actually invite people to see more about, oh, I want to be a part of this, because the press releases are actually going out to a whole syndication of places so that they're seeing, oh, there's this thing that I should participate. And they're not necessarily, and you're reaching people that are not on social media, but may still be watching old school TV, right? So this is again where you're maximizing resources, but also understanding how you can collaborate with other people to pull them in to help you get your word, get your message, get your voice out, so that you're not spinning your wheels. That's the thing, is you're spinning your wheels and you're tired, and it doesn't give you steam to actually do more, to just a little bit, get that person and draw them in.
Thank you for that. I see there's two questions in the chat. One is, there's a contrast that I noticed. Cell phone footage for social media is captivating versus cell phone footage being inappropriate for some persons. Is there a way to guide folks what works best for what? And how does it affect those who are not yet able to collect those resources? It's a lot of questions. How to avoid clickbait, not enough or too much? And clickbaiting is a really interesting one.
Yes.
Whenever you thought,
I would definitely say be true to yourself. That's the other thing. There's a young lady who's an artist, but she has spina bifida and she does not show her face. So at this point, when she is creating her art, she positions the camera in such a way that you can see the artistry. You even see her wheelchair like move away, like she's about to like create something. And so she has a segue that she does not feel she herself needs to be in front of the camera. So it's also becoming creative about how you're actually getting your message across, because it's not always like, hey guys, I'm so like it's not a show and tell, because that's another thing too, is like, I'm not vain and I really don't want to be up in front of the camera like that, right? So it's like, how do you find it creative? Like one of my staff members is actually here, and she's our content creator for our team. She actually had her camera set up here, so we only saw her fingers. And literally, she just did a time lapse of her creation, but you don't see her face, right? So that's another thing too, that you're able to tap into things that don't actually compromise your person, right? And your comfort. So that was that part.
thank you. Maybe it probably is a question for April, or again to you, Aaliyah. And the question is, the digital space can be a fleeting space. Any thoughts on archiving the digital space and maintaining relevance and a relationship to legacy making?
Well, that was why we decided to create Imprimo. So, it is a lot of different things. Certainly, like sharing your work and telling the story of your work is like really what I think is most exciting about it. But it also serves as an archive, not only of your work, but like where your works have been shown, like all that kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of really good potential for making those kind of sites and making them exciting and interactive for people.
Most definitely, and I don't believe in shameless plug. As I said, I have a communications degree. I run a company called Cachet Dance, and Cachet Dance will be having a conversations on May 20th around this idea of digital archiving and also archiving diversely in a digital age. in partnership with Dance Collection Dance. And a workshop also about for artists from the IBPOC, primarily from the IBPOC perspective, about how they begin to think about archiving magazines and video footage and coding it in a digital way. So again, look out for that. It's May 20th. I'll be the host, as if I don't host enough. And it's a curiosity of mine also about how do we begin to think about a digital space as a footprint, as we've been talking about, but also how do we begin to map that footprint and think of it as an archival space in its own right. I see, okay, another question here. Can the panelists speak about the difference between monetizing and community building? I think as artists and not-for-profits folks, I bristle at the idea of monetizing our work. Is there a way of framing this in a way that we can make the transition to value our work in a way that touches more people and keeps our organizations sustainable and growing? I guess the question is, how can we do both and connect those two processes as one? Any thoughts on that? It's a lot there.
I have a thought on that. That's really interesting. We talked about it before. Yeah, I completely relate to this. For me, I feel that the community that I reach is small, and that's okay. It's a specific, folks who like the kind of dance that we offer. So for me, it's more about a community building exercise. We're not gonna make a lot of money out of that, but I think it is really interesting to share, to see, like, we do live streams and often we have 70 people watching, which is great. Our theater is only 50 seats. So it's not that I raise $70 times $5. It's more that I'm so excited that 70 people checked in to see what we do and what the artists that we present do. So I think it's a completely different conversation. For me, it is not about monetizing. It is really about building an interest and making that accessible. So perhaps at some point, the people that you reach may be interested in either coming to the theater or creating themselves as well, or so I think it's more about, I think there's a way, I don't know how to do it, but I think there's a way to do this. And it's really easy to fall into the trap of equating success with clicks, or to me, it's about a beautiful shared experience that can be viewed and that can help build the artist's reputation and give them a bit more means to develop as creators. So yeah, it's kind of a jungle out there, isn't it?
Yes, Aaliyah.
You can do both. You absolutely can do both. And in some ways, when I tell you that you have to take viewers offline, that is your way of building your community. Many times when we're dreaded, oh, I've got to build my email list, right? It's like, oh my God, I don't want to spam them. But remember, for me to authorize you to be in my inbox, I have to give you my email. So in those kind of situations, let's look at Facebook, for instance. Facebook has Facebook groups, specific groups that are looking for those particular things. So that means that if you have someone who has experienced your product, group, send them to your actual group. But then if you actually have people that are looking for Black artists, IBPOC artists, IBPOC songwriters, there's literally just that song, that's just that title in and of itself can create a searchability. So now when people are looking for this thing, they may not know your actual product that you are monetizing, but they now see this community. Now they join this community and now they can be able to participate in what you may have to offer. And not everything has to be directly to the product itself. So you can paint a piece and give the piece away. But you can also then sell actual digital prints, or you can sell t-shirts, or you can sell an experience where they get to paint with you live on a particular event, or they get to be subscriber onlys. I know we know of OnlyFans, but you know, Instagram actually created something similar where you have to pay to get behind that wall block based on Instagram, and you get compensated for that. So this is again where now you're monetizing an experience, but also being able to create a unity of people who want that same experience for themselves. And now they're interacting with each other, they're chatting. So you can do both. You can absolutely have, oh, sorry, April. So yeah, so you can actually do both. Go ahead, April.
No, I just put it in there. People can read it or not. Continue.
So yeah, so if you want to have community, absolutely necessary, because there's power to you having a community and being able to monetize that by offering additional services, products, or connection to them that may revolve around your art, but may not be the art directly itself.
Thank you. I'm mindful. Wow, we need to do this part 2. Speakers, are you up for a part 2 of this conversation in the fall? As I do believe that there's such rich, we spoke about the idea of, in April, we agreed on this idea of like educating, right? And I realized that also as creators, as leaders, as administrators, the education we require in these particular contexts that also Aaliyah is bringing into space, and Nina has mentioned around collaborating, is that everything in the digital space and with our organizations is a collaboration. And could we begin to think of anyone out there in the digital space who may click like or follow us as a part of that collaboration? What could that look like for monetizing our arts practice? What could it look like for the benefit of our organizations and the ways in which communication goes out? And so for me, I'm super excited because this design thinking must, I feel, marry creative content mapping. And are we as artists, our arts organization going, what is our reach? What is our creative content mapping? How far across the world are people actually engaging with our work? That might be a part of building this conversation around community, but also communities. And how can we begin to think about that diversely? So I am like, there has to be a part 2 to this. As program manager, we should definitely delve into a part 2 with these particular relationships. And so thank you everyone for still being in, for participating and coming into the conversation. I realize the richness that we're providing by being in this space, and it's a digital space, and that this, for the most part, if it would have happened in a physical space, but the interactions that are possible in digital space are, as Nina is mentioning, is not like that possible in a physical space. So I'm grateful